So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay and to a veritable scene of carnage on what I can only assume to be the River Gwathlo, seeing as it is the forces of Cardolan that are going to be on the defence for another Eclipse scenario, which is quite clearly a beach assault, which obviously you can't do beach assaults in the way that you can do on later Total War games where the ships are actually a part of the battle itself, but this certainly gets the point across, doesn't it? This might be the most boats that I've seen on a Reforged battle replay on a single map at any rate, and rather an unusual choice of invader, because it is going to be the HARADRIM. I do wonder where they got their boats from, doubtless from their Black Numenorian overlords over in Umbar, so the boat's probably on lease. But they are here, and the interesting thing about this battle, it is going to be attack-defense, it is going to have very much a siege-type look to it, but part of the settlement, of course, has already been taken. A lightning-fast assault, after all. It's not every day that you expect to see a rather large armada of ships come up your river and invade your town. So it's going to be an interesting one, this, for Cardolan, because part of the initial settlement has already been taken, but for the HARADRIM there's going to be really no opportunity for them to take this slowly. They're not going to be able to take the slow approach that several attacking factions can do in these larger scenario battles, as we have seen in the past. They're going to have to get right down to business, and while they have taken the initial part of the village, there are still some pretty good positions Cardolan can take up, and the HARADRIM are just going to have to accept the fact that Cardolan are going to be able to use at least some of their range tools to good effect, but Cardolan are also going to be under pretty significant pressure pretty quickly in this fight as well, and the HARADRIM are going to be a little bit more savage than Cardolan in melee. The armour piercing will certainly do them no harm whatsoever. But yes, we'll go through the armies now, and this is probably going to be where we see the first of the action get underway, so obviously there's going to be no cut in this battle replay as such. We're going to be getting right down to business, and we will be going through the attacking armies first and foremost, starting with Mr. Meany over here playing as the first of the HARADRIM forces. I think it was a little bit foolhardy for him to expect to be able to use the Southron archers in a skirmishy style fashion, given how close the army deployment zones were to one another, and doubtless he's going to get caught with his trousers down, really, because the infantry's right there. More on Cannon Fodder's army just a little bit later on. But yeah, these Southron archers are in pretty big trouble, because while they can be a pretty decent, fairly cheap, not completely defenseless archer at range, and their damage values are very average, but they do what they're supposed to for the HARADRIM. They can't really do that if they get attacked in melee, because they're doubtless to say they're not the best in terms of melee combatants, and there are 3 units of them here, so not the sort of thing that this army can afford to lose completely for nothing. This is, however, where Harad can start to claw some of this back, because they do, of course, have a very good armour-piercing presence in their army. The Southron Warband and Pikemen are really the least of their armour-piercing tools, but even so, all of this does still add up, and it does mean that even their lowliest non-fodder tier units have that little bit of an extra edge against the right kind of targets, and Cardolan are certainly the right kinds of targets, because they are very typical for the Western Kingdoms of Men, in that a good chunk of their defence comes from the armour that they wear. HARADRIM Spearmen are here. This is the fodder tier unit that I was talking about. They've got a little bit more in common with stuff like the Dunlending Clansmen and the like, in that they're not complete garbage in terms of what they cost and what they offer in comparison to the Orcish factions, but they're not going to do much better than that. And in all honesty, the cheaper cost of those really poor Orc units actually makes them more efficient than this kind of unit, in my opinion, but still. Back here we have some upgraded dismounted Serpent Guard. This is the kind of line infantry unit that's going to be the superior of anything Cardolan have that's of a similar kind of unit. Cardolan do have the kind of infantry units that can be a real problem to this, however, mainly in their bodyguard tier units. The pikes can also keep them at range, but if the dismounted Serpent Guard can close into melee, it's the sort of thing that Cardolan won't really enjoy being in a prolonged fight with. Doubtless Cardolan will almost certainly try to utilise their skirmishers, specifically their crossbows and potentially their rangers, to do a lot of damage there. Harad do have the ability to skirmish with a heavier archer, and that is the Serpent's Fangs. Poison arrows, which actually may come into effect against a faction like Cardolan. Among the forces of good in Middle-earth, they're probably the most squeamish when it comes to their morale. But that's not going to be something which happens in the early game. Even factions with lower morale don't break right off the cuff. The Serpent's Fangs will need to be alive for later on when Cardolan start to take some more losses. Pretty good in melee as well, with those two-handed swords that they wield. A couple of units of the Hashari, pretty good in melee, very lightly armoured of course, so they are very much glass cannons. at least at range, because in melee their melee defense does help them out a lot, especially against the more rank and file Cardolan units. And then back here we've got some Southron Lancers. If they can escape the beach here and actually get around Cardolan, they may be useful, but if they can't, then they're going to get bottled up on the beach and ultimately engaged by either spearmen in melee or shot to death by arrows at range. And the same really applies to Black Serpents. The Black Serpents are a very quick unit of multiple HP Lancers though, and the fact they are a bodyguard tier cavalry unit does mean that they'll be a little bit more resilient if they do get caught out by a few of those units. Now then, moving on to the central position where part of the village has already fallen. Froggy, playing as another Haradrim army of course, Southron Lancers and Dismounted Serpent Guard once again. We have some Southron Warband, more Dismounted Serpent Guard. Once again, he's gone for his archers at the front, although there is a little bit more of a reason for this, in that he's deployed his stake, so any Cardolan cavalry will not be able to charge right into the front of the Haradrim army. Given the fact that the Haradrim do have a fair amount of armour-piercing spears and pikes and even low-tier militia spears, it's unlikely that that would have been possible anyway if Harad was going to move forward in the typical fashion, but still, it does show a bit of forward planning. Dismounted Serpent Guard are there. Of course we have Southron Pikemen, who they are at the back, but I still think they're probably within archer range here, so maybe it's just the terrain that they're trying to hide behind. Some Serpent's Fangs are here, some Southron Archers already firing as well. They've got a little bit of cover from the buildings actually, and there is, I think, a pathway leading through here, but it's going to be a little bit more difficult for Cardolan to close them down in melee as easily. Froggy's also got some Haradrim Spearmen and some Dismounted Serpent Guard there, as well as some more Southron Lancers and some more Warband. Quite a lot of these rank and file units in the Haradrim. It's very numerous armies that we're seeing so far. Then we have Mevon, who also has Southron Lancers. Interesting to see so many of these basic Southron cavalry units. We don't often get to see them, usually for good reason. They're very fragile and ultimately, generally speaking, not terribly useful, but on this occasion Harad will have to make do with the tools they have. Dismounted Serpent Guard, Southron Pikemen, more Dismounted Serpent Guard. Interesting to see the almost complete lack of Trollmen units. I say that because I do see one over here, the Champions of Nafra, by far and away the scariest force that Cardolan will face in melee today. Huge amounts of armor-piercing damage, but Harad are not going to be able to lean on that Trollman presence quite so much in this situation. Usually it's a no-brainer to bring them if you have the ability to pick your own armies. This is a custom scenario, of course, so they're going to have to roll with the more numbers-focused approach they have here. Serpent's Fangs, Dismounted Serpent Guard and Southron Warband. Plenty of Dismounted Serpent Guard a fair way into the settlement already, as well as some Southron Warband sticking out in front as well. The final Haradrim army that's going to try and tackle the high ground position over here is going to be Eclipse's army himself. Big thank you to him for sending me this battle replay. Southron Warband and Archers once more. Plenty of Southrons, including the Pikemen. Dismounted Serpent Guard and more Serpent's Fangs. Some Mounted Serpent Guard. They're a little bit more like it in comparison to the Southron Lancers. But even so, the same sort of weaknesses apply in the sense they'll fizzle out pretty quickly if you're not careful. More Dismounted Serpent Guard, a very long line of Haradrim here, made up mainly of Southrons, a few standard Haradrim in there as well. More Southron Warband and more Serpent Guard, and he also has a unit of the slightly more dangerous Black Serpents. So that's going to do it for the Haradrim army. It's not typical, as I said, very much a numbers-focused approach, but that does mean that they should be able to blanket the field a little bit more easily, and there's plenty of room to manoeuvre on this battlefield as well for Harad. They can get in and around the Cardolan defences, especially when you consider that Sin of the Dark Cloud over here has deployed a little bit further back, which will allow Eclipse, if he so chooses, to help his allies in the central settlement. That could leave himself open to a counter-attack if he does that, though. Greenway Garrison Footmen and Minhiriath Men-at-Arms, Minhiriath Spearmen. So again, a little bit more of a basic front line this from Cardolan, but certainly more of a defensive edge in comparison to that of the Haradrim. Standard pikes, but certainly bulkier infantry units on the front in comparison to those Southrons, but lacking the armour piercing. Hearthguard of Amon-Sul, very heavy archer. They're going to be more at home skirmishing than any of the Haradrim skirmishers. Even the Serpent's Fangs won't be able to outlast a unit like this. Mercenary Guildsman offers a little bit of armour piercing for all the good that will do. It'll be slightly effective against the Serpent Guard units, but not so much against the rest of the Haradrim roster, and they themselves, terrible morale, truly awful. Bandits for a bit of a javelin action. Interesting to see less javelins on display for the Haradrim as well, but there may be hidden units here and there. That's the sort of thing we can't discount either. Mercenary Guildsmen, we've got some Dunedain Captains. They'll be very much at home in facing off against the more lightly armoured units that the Haradrim have to offer. The armour upgrade will help them a little bit as well to stay alive. But yeah, they should have a pretty good battle. Tharbad Warhammers, like I said, armour piercing not so useful against Harad, but in terms of a singular infantry unit, this is the most impressive thing that Cardolan can muster. Not too dissimilar to the Champions of Nafra on the other side, actually, in terms of what they offer. Royal Court of House Durandal, they're certainly more heavy-duty cavalry than the Black Serpents on the other side, but they are a little bit less manoeuvrable, a little less speedy. Maybe that will not be too much of a problem though, because I think Cardolan would prefer to take a melee engagement, to be honest with you. Standard mercenary cavalry is something we haven't seen in a long time. They have the same problems as the mercenary units on foot, but considering the amount of Southron lances on the field, that's the kind of unit the mercenary cavalry is actually going to be very much at home in dealing with. So potentially an opportunity for lesser seen units to shine here. Then we have Langer, who has got some lumbermen. He also has some of those Tharbad Warhammers. 2 trebuchets are in the settlement, the first of which is over here, which is another reason for Harad to really get a move on and try and get through this settlement as quickly as possible. If they get bottled up, they're going to be in real trouble at the hands of that artillery. And units like the Wardens of Tir Gorthad over here are going to be ideal for trying to bottle them up. A really good unit of pikemen. So Greenway Garrison Spearmen also to hold the line. Minotaur Roman Gatekeepers, Greenway Garrison Archers, plenty of Greenway Garrison Archers actually, in addition to some Minhiriath Men-at-Arms. I mean, it is a rather broken defence when you look at it like this. There's plenty of gaps maybe that Harad can exploit if they're quick. There's also plenty of infantry for Cardolan they can use to cover these gaps. So I think actually we're going to start to see the shape this battle's going to take pretty fast. I think Harad are going to move into melee pretty quickly, and we'll see whether they choose the right shape or not. Hearthguard, Minhiriath Spearmen, and a few more units further back over here as well. Some Greenway Garrison Footmen, Standard Pikes, Minhiriath Spearmen as well. Morris over here has got some Minhiriath Archers and some Spearmen as well. Minhiriath Men-at-Arms, Archers, Hearthguard of Amon Sul, plenty of these standard Minhiriath units backed up by Greenway units. The army compositions are actually fairly similar, you'd have to say. Harad have probably got more numbers on the field, which is to be expected. They're on the attack, the onus is on them to push forwards. Will they be able to withstand the damage that is going to be coming out of the likes of the Minotaur Roman Gatekeepers? I mean, there's not a huge amount of Cardolan crossbows either, which is interesting to know. So much like how Harad don't have a huge amount of Trollmen, in fact only just the one unit, there's not tons and tons of crossbows that Cardolan can rely upon to do that reliable armour-piercing damage at range, especially when they're this close. They're already going to be in range of all the Haradrim units. Spearmen, the other trebuchet is over here, already firing, of course, Greenway Garrison Spearmen and Lumbermen. And last but by no means least, we have Cannon Fodder over here, who's got the Tharbad Riders, 2 units of them. They've actually got a really nasty charge on them, which is comparable actually to the higher tier units of cavalry, which does give them actually a little bit of utility, even with the game being as it currently is at the moment. They are still very fragile, however, not only in terms of their physical stats, but also their mental ones. They are liable to break, much like anything in Cardolan. Greenway Garrison Archers up here on the hill. Cannon Fodder's got a really good position actually to shoot down into Mr. Meany's army, especially given the fact that he can catch out those archers so quickly. Cannon Fodder's in a pretty advantageous position. That could be the sort of thing which snowballs as the battle goes along. We'll have to wait and see. Hearthguard, Greenway Garrison Archers, and that's about it. One thing I have noticed as well, no Rangers on the field today, which is interesting. Neither side can use them as a crutch, but that's perhaps something which you would expect to see more of from Cardolan, being that they're the defenders. And the standard front line, Greenway Garrison Footmen at the centre, some mercenary guildsmen to offer a little bit of arm piercing. The rest made up of Minhiriath units. There's also some mighty Tharbad Warhammers in there as well to offer that real jolt of quality. More Greenway units over here as well. So yeah, that's going to be it for the compositions. It's going to be a pretty violent affair. You can see there's plenty of crossings. There is a settlement Cardolan can pull back to over there. Whether they'll want to, or whether they'll even get the chance to, given how violent the initial engagements are going to be, we'll have to wait and see. But without further ado, let's get this show on the road. So as expected, we are going to see the archers caught out by the advancing Minhiriath Men-at-Arms, spears, and all of the Greenway units that are backing them up. And just in general, this battle is actually one where it's a rare case where I might actually give the slight edge to the defenders right from the off, especially in an area like this where you can see the archers have got a pretty good shot into the Haradrim. The Haradrim are one of those factions as well, which is pretty vulnerable to this kind of punishment. And just in general, Harad are also bottled up, so it's going to be pretty nasty for them. This fight is also going to be very, very violent across the way. In fact, I'm going to have to turn this down to half speed just so we can take stock of the situation. It's really only on the side where Sin and Eclipse are, where the battle isn't going to get underway almost immediately. Lumbermen are going to be blocking the advance of the dismounted Serpent Guard. The Serpent Guard will of course beat them without support, and the Southron Warband are on the way also. But the real issue for Harad here is whether or not they can escape being bottled up on the shoreline, so that they don't get shot by all of Cardolan's missiles. In particular, while they aren't fully reliant on their crossbows in this case like they are normally, they don't have as many as they would normally have. There are still units like these gatekeepers in a really good position to shoot into important targets. Southron Lancers are here. plenty of arrows streaking overhead from the Southron archers within the settlement, but I don't know how good their angle of fire is necessarily going to be. A single unit of Minhiriad spears are moving forward, but they're going to get mobbed really by a bunch of Haradrim that move through here. There we can see a trebuchet shot getting a nice hit there into the advancing dismounted Serpent Guard. The Serpent Guard also moving back down here from Mevin. And once again over here we can see a pretty large engagement once again, and similar story here. Cardolan's infantry really is just here to hold the line, pin Haradrim against the shoreline for as long as possible, and then utilise those missiles against the vulnerable Haradrim. See over there that Eclipse's army is moving forward, but you can also see that some Southron Warband are going to be coming in from the side. I think this is a good idea. Sending at least some units to get into the side of Lango's army will put a lot of pressure here on the centre and maybe relieve the pressure on your allies in the middle. That isn't a luxury that's going to be happening over here. As we said, Mr. Meany is having to deal with a pretty nasty situation of his own, so unfortunately for Froggy, he won't be able to expect any reinforcements. There's some Tharbad Warhammers on the front here. They're doing very well so far, Cardolan, to relieve this pressure. Meanwhile, Harad actually doing pretty well on the front line. This armour piercing coming in very, very handy, but I feel as though those archers that are up on the high ground at some point are going to start yielding some good results as more Minhiriath come in. Very violent like this, plenty of unit models on display. Serpent's Fangs actually getting into melee, perhaps seeing that really they're not going to be able to do as much damage at range quickly enough for that to be worthwhile, and they're also a very fine melee combatant, so they're going to be able to defeat standard mercenary units here. Dismounted Serpent Guard, Southron archers. They've got a few of their archers in the background trying to return fire. Mr. Meany's cavalry is also over here. The Hashari Stalkers, that's a unit of attacking rangers then, but Greenway Garrison Spearmen are coming around the flank. They have been intercepted by some dismounted Serpent Guard though, so I can't imagine that's going to go all that well for them. Meanwhile, here in the middle, and this is a real problem. This is, especially here in the middle for Harad, they can't really afford to hang around here, because those trebuchets, if they continue to get shots like that, remember, this is more of a numbers-focused Haradrim army. A lot of it is made up of Southrons, whose morale is not going to withstand getting hit by trebuchets at close range like that. Southron Warband are coming around here. I mean, Harad are doing pretty well on the flank, but that's only because they're only going up against standard lumberman. There is a little bit of support coming in from up on top of the hill from the Hearthguard of Amon Sul, so the dismounted Serpent Guard have taken a bit of a beating. But that is a potential way in for Harad. Well, you can see here some Serpent Guard getting into position. Hashari Shadows, Cardolan's cavalry loitering around on the periphery as well. More units being sent to the front here from Cardolan. They need to send some units to marshal that cavalry as it makes its presence felt, but for the time being, the foe that is in front of them represents the more immediate threat. There's no fighting going on within the actual settlement itself as such. It's mostly on the two edges of it. Perhaps Harad, not wanting to go through the settlement to get bottled up, they're going to want to try and spread their wings a little bit. Dismounted Serpent Guard and Haradrim Spearmen facing off against the Minhiriath. Again, though, if that trebuchet has got them in their sights. A bit of friendly fire there, though. That is always a bit of a risk when it comes to artillery. You can hit yourself, and that's the last thing Cardolan want, because as much as Harad's morale may collapse, so too may Cardolan's. Hearthguard of Amon Sul continuing to fire. Froggy's army looks to have been... well, it's taken quite a lot of damage, hasn't it? I mean, Tharbad Warhammers, Mercenary Guildsmen, plenty of armour piercing that will be fairly handy against that line of Serpent Guard. Well, I say line, there's not that many of them left. It's looking pretty good for Morris's wing of the Cardolan force so far. Rather interestingly, I think actually Mr. Meany is doing somewhat better. Yeah, he is. There's a bit of a rout going on here. Several elements of the Cardolan army not having too great a time of it. Serpent's Fangs are going to try and shoot into the Tharbad Riders as they move forward. Not the most convincing of charges, but still. Hashari in melee. Maybe it is units like the Hashari which are presenting such a challenge for all of these basic Cardolan soldiers, but fair play. I thought based on the positioning here this would be really, really dangerous for Harad, but it does look as though they are going to be victorious over here. Not free of charge, of course, they still will have taken a fair amount of damage, but if they are going to lose one of the fights in the middle, they need to win elsewhere. And this is a good example of that. And Hiriath's still standing their ground for now, but The quality of units like the Dismounted Serpent Guard really making itself apparent now. Also the Black Serpents. I mean, this is also one of the things which has maybe happened which we've missed. Cavalry getting in behind enemy lines, charging into the rear like this. Exactly the sort of thing that's going to break them in Hiriath Spearmen, as you can see. Very fast as well, very dangerous. You can use the Black Serpents well. They can be a real nightmare. Tharbad Riders, I mean, they're not going to beat the Black Serpents in melee. Again, single HP cavalry is not really going to have the ability to do that, but they need to stop the Black Serpents from hammer and anviling this line. The day is already lost, but we need to prevent it from getting even worse. Got some Greenway Garrison Spearmen coming in here now to help finish off the warband. A whole lot of some kills inflicted on these lumbermen from missile units. Lord Court of House Thorondor loitering around. Eclipse is now completely going to abandon the idea of maybe going up onto the hill to engage Eclipse. He's going to come down here instead to attack from the side, which is probably for the best because he can't afford to just sit there for too much longer. Both of his allies here in the middle are losing, while his ally on the other flank is going to win. That isn't going to be enough for him to just sort of sit back and wait and see how this pans out. He needs to come to the aid of his fellow Southrons here in the middle. There are a few breaking units of pikemen, but the Minhiriath for the time being are holding the line. And these missiles are going to still prove to be a problem for all these HARADRIM, especially the pikemen. Southron Lancers very depleted. Southron Archers getting into a decent position to lay down some supporting fire of their own. Oof, that was fortunate. Right over the heads. Not the most damaging archer by any means, the Southron Archers, but they will do fine in this situation, just for a little bit of extra support. Victory seems certain for the Minhiriath over here once again. They're not a flashy unit by any means, but we've seen recently, just in the last siege battle we saw with Dorwinion, the Alvalin units, very basic, but they were very, very dependable in that fight, and we may be seeing a similar sort of thing here with the Minhiriath units from Cardolan. Minhiriath Archers continuing to lay down that really valuable supporting fire. And Cardolan now pushing Harad all the way back to the beach. The Hashari trying to do as much damage as they can with their floating swords, and I mean, they're going to succeed here. Morris has left his units out in the open a little bit. I'm really quite surprised that Froggy isn't going for the Wardens of Tir Gorthat, but 3 kills are what they are. Better than nothing, certainly. Minotaur Roman Gatekeepers and Tharbad Warhammers joining with some Minhiriath Man-at-Arms to go right the way back to the boats on the beach, and Cardolan could come around and start attacking the Harad army over there as well, which is why it's important Eclipse arrives sooner rather than later over there. Well, a little bit of extra friendly fire inflicted on these Minhiriath units over here. Now then, let's see, Mr. Meany coming up onto the hills. Going to finish off the archers, which were not as decisive in this fight as I thought they would be. Hashari Stalkers shooting at point blank. It may not be worthwhile going after Greenway Garrison archers in such a fashion, but I suppose they routed with immediate effect, so can't have been that bad of an idea, I suppose. But now, Mr. Meany also now, I think, needs to come in from the side and help. Well, his ally there is already gone, so interesting thing now is, what does he do? Does he maybe try to go all the way around the settlement? I mean, going that way will take an awfully long time, and it's a risk. I think he should probably just come across here and put up another front against the victorious Cardolan force that was over here. Yes, they've probably taken less damage than you, but you're going to need to deal with them eventually, and if you don't, it's probably Mevon's army that's going to pay the ultimate price. Perhaps not with Eclipse on the way. I mean, you can also see here that Sin is now also moving across, so all this fight has really done is shift positions from the hills down here, which is still better for Harad. I mean, that hill position up there, very difficult. It would have been very difficult for Harad to dislodge Cardolan from there. The terrain just wasn't really on their side. Southron pikemen are coming in. They don't have any support though, I don't think, so I'm not entirely convinced that they're going to do all that well. Mercenary guildsmen, if they can get in and amongst those pikes, the really low base stats of the Southron pikemen is going to be a problem. Are they routing already? No, they're not. They're just going to move in with sheer mass. I don't know. This entire Cardolan relief force moving forwards. I mean, there is some of Eclipse's units, but not a huge force. Too many lumbermen and Greenway units blocking their way. Greenway garrison archers, Minotaur Roman gatekeeper shooting into the flank, which is probably why they haven't done all that well. Deadly, deadly unit of crossbows. Greenway garrison archers repositioning themselves. This fight has been going on for quite some time now between Harad and Cardolan, probably the longest continuous fight that's still going on from the start of the battle. And I do think, based on the numbers here, Cardolan are actually going to give way without reinforcements. Also, a little bit of a flanking move is going to mean that Cardolan are going to need to focus on more than just that one position. Serpent's Fangs and Dismounted Serpent Guard going to be too much for a single unit of Minhiriath Spears to deal with. That unit of Serpent Guard shouldn't just go to the back, though. They should be looking to flank around, in my opinion. Plenty of ranged support still back there, though. Southron Archers still biding their time. Plenty of manpower still available to Harad, but is it of the level of quality which is going to be necessary to gain momentum here in this battle? Want to Tin Hall tab move again. This single unit of Southron Warband is surely going to fall at some stage soon. Well, I mean, it does look as though this Harad army is going to go right the way around into this settlement over here. Some Southron Lancers from NAVAL getting back here. I mean, what this effectively does is prevent Cardolan from retreating to what would have been a potential final stand location, but I would argue Cardolan don't necessarily need that. If they just keep fighting on the front. I mean, it does look as though Cardolan are actually going to retreat, though, which is kind of interesting. Perhaps they see what's going on there, going to retreat across the bridges and use the settlement at the back. If that's the case, Mr. Meany should wait until his allies clean up the settlement, and then they can attack the rear part of the settlement from two angles, rather than being stretched and ultimately destroyed one by one. In Serpent Guard, they're starting to catch units like Minhiriath Archers out. A little bit further back, yeah, I guess with all of those units being taken off the front line, Cardolan now do need to retreat in a more comprehensive manner. Minhiriath Spearmen. Not going to be enough to defeat Dismounted Serpent Guard. There's still a fair amount of Southron Warband and Pikemen constricting in on the rear guard that Cardolan have left. Excuse me. Serpent's Fangs. In the end, easily able to defeat that unit of Spearmen all on their lonesome. Other fights are still ongoing. I mean, there was a decent number of Cardolan units over here. Yeah, they are going to get those units out of there, the important ones. Which ironically means this unit of Southron Warband is already broken, fighting to the death, so they can get all of these units out of here at this point. Save as much as they can, cross those bridges. The interesting thing for me will be is if Harad can stop Cardolan from getting that far. You can see that there's some cavalry trying to stop them from moving the whole way back. That is interesting because Harad are going to be able to get into that position on the other side, so they're not going to be able to retreat all the way to the settlement, and as a result they're going to have to instead pitch their final stand on this hill. I mean, they've got terrain, but they won't be able to use really nasty choke points like those bridges to full effect. I mean, they can't afford to just linger here for too long, giving Cardolan's archers a chance to rack up a decent little kill count for themselves. Yeah, here we go. In come the Dismounted Serpent Guard, catching the Minhiriath Spearmen a little bit off balance there, and as we've already seen, the Dismounted Serpent Guard are too strong a melee combatant for the Minhiriath Spears to deal with. The Spears can hold them for a fairly decent amount of time, but they're not going to be outright victorious by any means. HARADRIM Spearmen. Down the hill come some bandits. A bit of javelin support certainly wouldn't go amiss for Cardolan. You can see Mr. Meany's army has arrived. Now he's going to have to get across those bridges. Some Hearthguard of Amon Sul from cannon fodder, which managed to escape from his clutches, but they're going to get charged by the Southron Lancers. Not a particularly effective charge though, and The Hearthguard of Amonsul, very tough spearmen themselves, so they're going to be able to kill off more of the cavalry, but they're going to slow the Hearthguard from moving across those bridges just a little bit. Not enough to ultimately prevent them from reaching their destination, but still. HARADRIM spearmen are broken and fighting to the death. Another way up the hill, being pressured over here. So there's plenty of ways that Harad can use to get up here. I mean, it's very steep, but you do need to put pressure on every angle if you are to be as effective as you'd like. Royal Court of House Sarondor getting a bit of a charge on the dismounted Surfer Guard. They're also shaken and very tired. Having to fight uphill into pikes is not the most attractive proposition for a soldier. They are getting up here, pursuing. Javelins, what are they firing at? Going after some Southron archers. More Southron archers. There's the Serpent's Fangs as well, the poison arrows, which, I don't know, I mean at this point Harad are actually the more likely of the two forces to rout, given the situation is what it is. I don't know if about that, they're wavering now. With the Royal Court of House Sarondor coming in, they managed to stabilise a little bit. There's not many of the Royal Court left, but they are going to be better in this sort of fight than any other cavalry unit on the field because of their heavyweight nature. Up the hill comes some Hashari Shadows. And Hiriath backed up by the Greenway Garrison Footmen. It's not a flashy front line, but it's an effective one in this kind of situation as long as you can keep the shape of it. Bandits still doing their thing. They've run out of ammunition there. Some of them have pulled out their short swords. Some of them have not, however. They do still have that artillery. Hearthguard of Amonsul. Mr. Meany does need to pick up the pace a little bit and start attacking from this side as well. It may end in failure, but you'll be relieving some of the pressure from your allies at the front here, which is quite necessary at this point. I don't really know what Mevin is doing with these units over here. He's taking a long time to get into position, whatever he's attempting to do, and it's certainly not worth it. Eclipse still moving forward. There's some mercenary cavalry attempting to help back up this unit of Hearthguard of Amonsul, but I mean, HARADRIM spearmen are not going to be enough either. I mean, you could make the case for saying that maybe Eclipse is the one that's jumped the gun a little bit here. Mevin going around the shoreline, not in position, ready to attack. Mr. Meany still not across the bridges, so his allies weren't ready to make this a unified assault, and as a result they may end up fizzling out somewhat here, Harad. They're in danger of doing that, I think. Defeat still seems certain on this front line for them. Still more missiles. I mean, that maybe is a bit of a saving grace, the fact that Harad do still have a decent number of missiles at their disposal. Going after the bandits, just trying to bleed away what manpower Cardolan have. Here we are, still doing their thing on the front line. Here we have Man-at-Arms. Nice hit into the Serpent Fangs there. Kind of worthwhile, I suppose. I mean, it's one of the better units that Harad have on the field. They still don't know precisely where the champions of Neferat have gone. I mean, they were part of Mevin's army, were they not? I mean, there they are. They were clearly a part of that big melee engagement, which was lasting a long time, because there's only 8 of them remaining. So they can't rely on that unit anymore either. Well, still not getting across the bridges quickly enough for my liking. Oh, interestingly enough, those HARADRIM spearmen have actually managed to kill the Cardolan general there. Fortuitous, especially given that there's also Tharbad Warhammers over here now. That's downright unfortunate for Morris, but his general has fallen, and now his army will be a little bit more susceptible to routing than it is under normal circumstances. Worth bearing in mind. Hearthguard. Southron pikemen adding themselves to the front line. I mean, trying to go pike to pike, their armour piercing will help, but they're so vulnerable to missile fire, the Southron pikemen. And over here, reinforcing this line with a healthy unit of mercenary guildsmen should prevent Harad from making any gains over on this side. Sure how much, like, the problem Cardolan are having at this point, I think, is going to be the damage they can deal. I mean, they've still got 2 units of Dunedain captains and a unit of Tharbad Warhammers that Sin can deploy, but that's really their damaging infantry. The rest of it is mostly defensive. I don't necessarily know how many missiles they have left either, which may prove to be a bit of a problem. Dunedain captains are going to be committed forward now. I mean, they are probably the best unit Cardolan have for dealing with Harad in melee. Heavy swordsmen like that, carving through the more lightly armoured units that Harad traffic in, especially these Southrons. Southron Warband will really not enjoy being in melee with them. More missiles forthcoming, mercenary guildsmen being peeled off that front line. Southron archers, I mean, it looks like Harad still have a lot of manpower over here, but quite a lot of it is out of ammunition. Southron archers just for the purposes of keeping this assault going. Meanwhile, Cardolan have taken up a position on this hill as well, maybe spreading themselves out, spreading themselves a little too thin. Mevin is now arriving, ready to attack that position. Mercenary cavalry coming down the hill once again. I'm surprised these HARADRIM spearmen haven't broke at this point, to be honest with you. They've lasted a lot longer and managing to kill the general means they've done far better than they had any right to. But still, another unit of Asgard Van Mansour. Southron archers from Mr. Meany. Firing in. What are they going after? I think they're going after the Greenway Garrison footmen, which is definitely the right choice. Want to get rid of those pikes, and they are very vulnerable even to the most basic of arrow fire. He still has quite a lot of his strength over there. The problem he has got now is he's got his archers on the bridges, which is all well and good. He's going to be able to whittle down some of the Cardolan troops that are over here, but he's in danger of this sort of thing happening. He doesn't have infantry nearby. He's going to need to get them retreating, otherwise the Minhiriath men-at-arms will catch them, and I think he is, well, he's very lucky there. Southron archers have lived a bit of a charmed existence in his life right from the start of the battle. I'm surprised that there's still as many of them alive as there are. And the addition of those Dunedain captains and mercenary guildsmen have made life significantly more difficult for this cluster of Southrons. And indeed, several of them are starting to rout now under this sort of pressure. Getting a few bits of friendly fire from poison arrows probably isn't helping their morale any, it must be said. Oof, look at that. Hailstorm of javelins there, leaving only one Black Serpent alive. And the final one ultimately clubbed to death by all of the Merc Guildsmen. Over yonder, Sin has committed his Tharbad Warhammers to try and help out over here. I mean, that should be enough to give them the edge over the dismounted Serpent Guard, and as long as you can do that, the rest of it is really just chaff that you have to mulch your way through over time. And I mean, Cardolan are counter-attacking here, which I'm not sure. This is exactly what Mr. Meany will have been hoping for. Really, he shouldn't be rewarded for not crossing the bridges in a timely manner, but that's exactly what may happen here. Yeah, you can see these Minhiriath have far overextended themselves, and they are in real danger now of routing off. They are going to get out of here, but only just. Unlucky, going after those Southron pikemen back there. Also the Hashari Stalkers doing a good amount of damage to the Minhiriath as they leave, but they have also revealed themselves, and as a result, they were getting shot, I think, by those crossbowmen, but no longer. Harad are now also hunting down the Minhiriath. A superior unit of line infantry, the Serpent Guard, and they may be able to finish off an entire unit here, which at this point in time, that's the sort of thing which are really significant gains for Harad. Meanwhile, how's Mevin's attack getting on? Because surely he's attacking now. And spreading themselves this thin, Cardolan. Minhiriath archers shooting at point blank. Combination of Warns of Tirn Gorthad, Greenway spears, and a few out of ammunition Minhiriath archers. I mean, it really comes down to how effective can the Warns of Tirn Gorthad be at holding back all of these enemies. Serpent's Fangs trying to shoot. I mean, this is a perfect position for the unit of archers. You can shoot right down into the heart of all those Southrons. Well, that's a real shame though. Wrong target in my opinion. Serpent's Fangs are a danger, sure, but you've got to go for the infantry here. They're in such a perfect position, and you need that support from your archers going into that infantry. Not going into the Serpent's Fangs. I'm sorry, I think that's a terrible, terrible mistake.
Battle is very much in our favour.
Darbad Warhammer's thinking of committing themselves in. I mean, again, Mevon's doing, I think, Morris a bit of a favour here by committing those Serpent's Fangs, because now he's going to be able to hit into these units and do damage to several units all at once. There goes another Cardolan general, again in a very similar place. Down here, this time Cannon Fodder's general, and again, right on the verge of the South-Run Pikemen routing, they run through another general. Crazy. Really unfortunate for Cardolan that. It's a big factor in how they could do in this fight as well. Meanwhile, Cardolan breaking through, Eclipse's army in real trouble, Royal Court House Thorondor and mercenary cavalry going to give them the mobility to hunt down any stragglers, and then the infantry as well. They're going to be able to surround Eclipse's final position, or I say final position. Looks as though he's already been defeated. So Cardolan victorious over here, which is another sign that maybe their efforts were a little bit broken and disjointed. Now we're starting to see Harad cross these bridges. But too little too late for Eclipse's army. Not entirely sure where those arrows are going. Right up into the air. Greenway Garrison archers going to get caught out by the dismounted Serpent Guard, but the Serpent Guard are going to regret that decision soon enough with the gatekeepers arriving on scene. Southron archers trying their best to support. I don't know, it's been a bit of a weird battle this. Some strange decisions from both sides. But if I had to guess, I think we've seen on several occasions in the past being super disjointed as the attackers can cost you fairly dearly. And I think that's going to be the case here as well, because I do believe Cardolan should go on to win from this position. Ones of Tirn Gorthad, Tharbad Warhammers, they just have quality units left as well, which is the problem. They still have those Dunedain captains, still have some Hearthguard of Amon Sul, stuff that's just a little bit too strong for Harad to have to deal with at this juncture. Still got some Hashari on the front line there as well, I suppose. Hearthguard moving back after the loss of the general, both generals I should say, both units of Hearthguard getting into position. Lango's unit over here, is this his general as well? I don't think so, I can't see the model. Either way, they're going to be able to defeat these dismounted Serpent Guard, and Mr. Meany's army is just a little bit stretched again. He needs to... I mean, I don't think it matters too much because I don't think he has the numbers nor the quality to be able to do much at this point. There goes the Harad general, Eclipse's general I believe. Forward come the bandits. And it's our Roman gatekeepers doing the business against the dismounted Serpent Guard. Missiles coming into that position over there.
The battle is very much in our favour. Victory will be ours.
Getting through in some places here, Harad, which is a little bit of a concern, but the arrival of those two units of Hearthguard may be enough. I don't know, this is a little bit ropey. The integrity of the front line has been exposed. Some Serpent's Fangs getting in behind enemy lines as well. They still have a bit of ammunition. I mean, poison arrows? Or are they going to get into melee? Either way, being decisive with this unit may be key. Poison arrows, will it be enough? I mean, the Greenway Garrison Spearmen are already broken and fighting to the death here. Harad are going to win this little fight. I mean, they've still got to fight their way through a fair amount of Hearthguard, though, which is going to be a bit of an issue. Having a look at the kills. Percentage of allies killed. 89%. We are seeing this from Cardolan's perspective, so they have a 2% lead. It's not a huge lead, but again, I think quality-wise, when you look at what Cardolan still have left, Darbad Warhammers, another unit of Hearthguard, Dunedain captains, the quality of the Cardolan units, in addition to having the slight edge in terms of percentage of kills, it's going to just be a little bit too much, I think. Again, there are a little bit of weird choices are being made time and time again in this battle. Like, all of these units could be coming down here and squashing Mr. Meany's army underfoot. Instead, Sin is electing to send forward individual units and send them hither and yon on the battlefield, which I think is a little bit bizarre. Hearthguard blocking more Harad units from crossing the bridge. Victory seems certain. Only a fool could lose this battle. Hiriath coming across here to try and help out the Hearthguard. There's also the Trebuchet crew. You can tell from the Arcadane style that they have, although I believe, do they not have... Yeah, they have like... Am I just going mad, or is that a slight green tint to them? Either way. They certainly look more Arthadanian than being from Cardolan. Hashari moving across the hilltops. Do they still have ammunition? Possibly. Mercenary Guildsmen doubling back now. They do still have ammo. Could be a problem for the reinforcements that Sin has sent across.
Our allies have fled the field like cowards.
Have they indeed? Some routing mercenary cavalry. And there go the Hasharis throwing daggers. They'll be good at cutting their way through these Cardolan units fairly quickly. Now the Tharvad Warhammers, the Dunedain captains are coming across. I have no idea why that wasn't in more of a unified manner, but such is the way of things. Dunedain captains and mercenary guildsmen over here with the Hearthguard should be enough to finish off Mr. Meany's army once and for all. I think in spite of the weird lethargy that Cardolan have displayed at several times in this battle, it's not going to be enough to salvage the battle for Harad. Bandits moving forward, going to prevent that very depleted unit of Southron archers from firing any more missiles. Their little wooden shields and butter knives. Yeah, they're broken and fighting to the death. Completely unsurprising, getting surrounded by Hearthguard and gatekeepers. And that's just about it. I mean, the trebuchet's out of ammunition, so Sin at this point will be deploying everything to the fight. Lango still has his general's bodyguard, but yeah, it's really only Sin's Cardolan army that has got any sort of weight behind it still. Serpent's Fangs moving in. There are still Tharvad Warhammers, another unit of Tharvad Warhammers coming in from Sin, and this is the problem, like having to deal with something like that in melee in the late game. Surely is going to be too much for them to bear. Hashari and Dunedain captains are coming up here to engage the Hashari. Interestingly enough, the Hashari are one of the examples of a unit from Harad that does have the melee defense, such that the Dunedain captains will not be super dominant in a fight with them. But they will still be victorious. The flying swords of the Hashari, that bug is a really bizarre one. The Hashari, of course, a unit model that's been in ever since vanilla 3rd Age. Still going strong. I really like the Dunedain Captain's upgraded model over Cardolan. Not too dissimilar to the Wardens of the North over in Arthedain, but obviously with a green hue. What is going on here? Yeah, he's deployed. I don't know. I feel like this is almost maybe like him pulling units off the fight because he knows they're going to win, so he wants it to be closer. That's how it feels at this point. Because by all accounts at this point, Cardolan should be crushing what remains of Harad. So I'm not sure what the overall purpose of this is, but que sera. Minhiria. Serpent Guard and Serpent's Fangs. No match, however, for the hammers from Tharvad. Serpent's Fangs, I think... I don't know if they are locked morale. What's going on over there? No, that's why. Okay. Well, that's unfortunate. That'll be something that we'll probably have to fast forward through because that'll be a real pain. When players decide to sequester, like in a free-for-all, yes, it makes sense to sequester units away like that, but not in a battle like this, because by the time they get activated, you've either already won or you've already lost. In come the Dunedain captains. Well, that Serpent Guard, or Serpent's Fang I should say, managing to kill off one of them in Hyria, but now he's surrounded on all sides by Warhammers. It's not going to go well for him, and there he goes. Spine crushed, turned to dust. There's still some Hashari, well I say some Hashari, there's 2 Hashari that remain. Is this the last one? No, there's 2 of them apparently. Throwing daggers, scoring some kills actually. Okay, at this point, there's a general. Is the general going to die at any point? I mean, he's getting stabbed by a bunch of Minhiriath, which is probably why they're not killing him all that quickly. The Serpent's Fang getting another kill. The general doing his thing. Slicing his way through Cardolan soldiers. Very effectively. Let's see how many he killed. I mean, he's killed like 6, just based on when we've been watching him. Pretty much every swing of his sword is resulting in a kill at this point. I mean, at this point he's surrounded by trebuchet crewmen, so it'll be easy pickings. This is an impressive little last stand from a general. Just the trebuchet crew remains. And I would feel confident in backing the general here. Although, having said that, we've seen generals lose to foes they really should be beating with relative ease already in this battle. And he's going to leave. His work here is done. It's been hard to get my bearings in this battle. It's just been one of those ones where I can't really follow the logic of what's going on. There are several things which just haven't been quite right. It's been a good battle, don't get me wrong, but the decision making has been bizarre. We'll go up to ×2 speed here because really we're just going to be waiting for these Southron archers to be engaged and ultimately destroyed. Hearthguard. Well, there goes the enemy general. Run down in the end by one of the Royal Courthouse, the Rondor, but he had a good run. Mostly killing units you'd expect him to kill, but still. Impressive nonetheless. Minotaur Roman gatekeepers. Defeat is a distinct possibility. Say it ain't so. There's still a red star over here, so that is a general unit, which is alive, the Serpent's Fangs, but they have been engaged by gatekeepers. Interesting little fight between 2 missile units, which are also very, very accomplished in melee. But that's the end of the Southron archers, so the last fight will be this one over here, which leads me to believe actually that the Serpent's Fangs might be winning this one, yeah. The formation of the Minotaur Roman gatekeepers, as with most polearm type units, is very, very important. So victory is a distinct possibility for both units, though, which is a little bit of a bizarre one. Not that it matters too much. We all know what the overall outcome of this battle is going to be. Hearthguard rounding the corner. He's going to be at still 1,000 frames left, though. Having a look though, 5% the difference. Yeah, that seems about right. I think in many ways Cardolan were actually the ones with the more bizarre choices in this fight. But, as I said at the start of the battle, it's one of those rare situations where I'd actually give the initial advantage in the fight to the defenders because of the position. Harad needed to scramble away from the beach. They actually did that in a pretty okay manner. More on that on the results screen, but yeah, it was... I think a Cardolan victory is probably the expected result here, but it was hard fought. Hearthguard's still showing why they are a more defensive unit. Not the best at dealing damage in melee, can certainly keep themselves alive, but can't rely on them to get you a ton of kills quickly. Like captains, on the other hand, a very different matter. Once again, we're going to see another last stand of a general. He's got to deal with slightly stronger foes, though, even though he is cut down one of those Dunedain captains with a good amount of competence there. Brutal. And there he goes.
It could have been we that were slain.
Dunedain captain's doing the business.
But fate has been kind and delivered us victory.
And this Harad naval invasion, they've come a long way from home, only for it to end in failure. Cardolan victorious. Again, like I said, weird kind of battle this one, but still an intriguing one nonetheless. The main thing about this battle, of course, was the fact that there was no time for the attackers or the defenders really to set themselves. They were right on top of each other right from the start. And that initial position, I think, was in favour of Cardolan enough that they were always going to do a lot of damage at range, but they didn't have access to stuff like rangers or tons of crossbows. So that is worth bearing in mind. Like, most of what they were doing damage with was basic archers, but they still used them well enough, I think. Let's see what did the damage for the Cardolan armies. 218 kills on the Hearthguard, 201 kills on the archers, so yeah, archers getting a lot of kills, and I think that will be the theme. A lot of the Cardolan forces, outside of maybe Sin's 3 bodyguard tier units and a few other units of Warhammers and the like, a lot of the Cardolan units were thoroughly defensive in nature, especially when you're talking about a faction like Harad, who are a little bit more damage focused. Tharbad Warhammer's doing quite nicely as well. Down here we've got, yeah, Hearthguard of Amon Sul, Minhiria Spearmen doing pretty well, Men at Arms, Warhammers. Royal Court of House of the Rondor were actually very useful. They fairly depleted fairly early on, but they were still useful throughout the entire battle. And again, Dunedain captains, so that was clearly Sin's army. This one, Hearthguard of Amon Sul, 409 kills on Minotaur Romain Gatekeepers, very impressive. Yeah, missiles for the most part, doing the lion's share of the work down here. And finally, again, Hearthguard of Amon Sul. So, very dependable unit we've seen here, the Hearthguard of Amon Sul, good at what they do. If you don't interrupt them from firing, they can rack up a decent kill count at range. And then in melee, we saw that they're also pretty solid, albeit, you know, the generals very unfortunate to die at the hands of much weaker units in the case of Morris and who else was it? Was it Langer? One of the other two. It was Cannonball, wasn't it? Yeah, one of the other generals falling to HARADRIM spearmen and very depleted Southron pikemen. Plenty of kills on those archers, though. Some good kills actually on the infantry as well. So yeah, fair play indeed. So yeah, big thank you to Eclipse for sending me another one of his scenarios to show off, and a big thank you to all the players for being a part of it. As for what's coming up next, I think by this point I will have already done an initial Rise of Mordor video. There will be more of that throughout December, maybe another couple of videos or so, because I don't want to just do all Rise of Mordor all in a row. I think what I'll be trying to do is maybe on Wednesdays or maybe every other Wednesday is the idea I've got in my head of more Rise of Mordor stuff. Outside of that, it will be business as usual, with mostly Reforged with a bit of Silmarillion sprinkled in there as well. And that should fairly comfortably see us through to the new year, at which point it probably will be a couple of months before I get my new hardware and we can start doing Rise of Mordor in a bit more of a concentrated manner with some more battles from that. At least that's the basic idea I have in my head, and of course next year has the potential to bring with it more upheaval as well, depending on how things go. I'm not entirely sure yet of how that's going to go, but there might be a bit of movement again, we'll see. But it's pointless speculating on that at the moment because I genuinely don't know how it's going to go. But yeah, regardless, big thank you to Eclipse and all the players once again. Hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.